Howdy, partners. Welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. I am Jason Oliver, joined once again, as always, by my two co-hosts, Jeff Arbuckle. Say hello, Jeff.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm glad I wasn't drinking when you started there. I would have had a wet microphone. But how you doing, Jason?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. And we also have here on my screen, looking at me, Chuck Moore. Chuck, say hello.
Howdy, scallywags. Wait, is that
Wait.
like a pirate thing?
or
The cowboy pirate.
It's a cowboy pirate, Clockwork Orange man.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. I guess outlaws are kind of pirates, right?
a little bit.
Yeah,
They're
a little
land
bit.
pirates.
Land pirates. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the last week 5 of our Western month, and we are closing it out with 2007's
Mhm.
The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
It's a long
The
title.
contractually obliged title by Brad Pitt.
Really?
It was in his contract. They couldn't
That's-
change the title. Yes.
That's amazing.
I like the title. I like the
I
title,
like the title, too.
because one thing I'm going to get into as we kind of get into it is I love that this is essentially the title of one of those little
Yep.
pulp magazines.
Yep, that's exactly right. It is also the title of the novel that it is based on by Ron Hansen. But yes, exactly right. That's what I kept telling Susan. She kept complaining about the title because she could never get it right. And I said, but it makes perfect sense. It's based on those old Western pamphlets, that, and tying back to our episode on Unforgiven, right? Where the guy was actually the person who wrote those pamphlets.
Well, yeah, and Robert Ford has a bunch of them in a shoebox.
Sure does. Sure
Yeah,
does, because
yeah.
he reads them. He idolizes these Western folk heroes.
Yeah,
Are any of them for the Duck
Specifically-
of Death?
Yeah, the
Probably.
Duck of Death. I'm sure he's got it. He collects them all like Pokemon. Early frontier Pokemon. Baseball cards. Yeah, so this movie is directed by Andrew Dominic, who is about, well, he probably already is at this point, very much in the media news for his Marilyn Monroe biopic.
Oh, timely.
Timely. I'm sure everybody's talking about that right now. A little behind the scenes where this episode is being recorded a couple months in advance.
Just about 4 weeks in advance of the
Yep.
movie being released.
Yep, yep. So, yeah.
He hasn't. Wow, Blonde's his first film in 10 years. He's done 2 documentaries in between. How about that? All right.
Yeah, he's kind of, it's interesting. His movies all kind of have like a different type of style. He's not kind of like a guy who sticks to a style, but I would say that the style of The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford is very Terrence Malick in its approach, right? It's lyrical at times, meditative, slow almost to a fault. It takes its time, kind of unwinding really not a whole lot of story, but over a pretty long period of film. But it works because it creates an
Yeah.
atmosphere and a tone and a kind of, you sort of feel a little bit immersed in it, and that's kind of like the Malick approach, right? There's an immersion, I think, in sort of the epic scale of things, even though many of the moments are quiet and meditative, right?
Yeah, no, I would say though that this serves pretty well as 2 intertwining character studies also,
Mm-hmm.
which I think also lends to that needs to be kind of slow as well, so that
Sure.
we can actually see how both of these people will eventually be unraveled.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it is interesting. It's so it's so similar in many ways to last week's movie, where It is definitely about a relationship between two men, but different dynamics, right? And different ultimate reasons for the tragic ending of both stories, right? I guess, what I find so interesting, I think, about both movies is that it's not these aren't stories about Jesse James or about Billy the Kid exclusively, right? And it's not telling their whole story. Both movies pick up really at the tail end of their lives, right?
Mhm.
Maybe the last year or so of their lives, and tells just the almost just that final chapter of their stories, right?
Yeah. Definitively. I mean, it's pretty much starts on the last train robbery of the James gang. So all of their exploits, all of the, what do you want to call them? The tales that would be spread about them are behind them.
Yeah.
At this point, for sure. Yeah. Jesse James he wants to keep holding on to that thing, but all of his brothers are essentially gone at this point. Except for, is it Frank James?
Frank is in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Well, Frank is there for the train wreck or train robbery, and then
he goes off. But they're both family men too at this point, I think, as well.
Yeah.
So there is kind of this weird pull. But I want to commend this movie on one thing. This movie is not out to make Jesse James into some sort of a folk hero.
Nope.
They present his two lives, but while I'm pretty sure he wouldn't beat up his wife, or you don't get the impression he would beat up his wife or do anything to his kids. He's not a good dude.
He loves his cousin. He married his cousin.
Right.
Yeah. He's ornery, right? He's just kind of like difficult to be around.
I would say he's downright frightening to be around.
I think it's paranoia, right?
Yeah.
It's this increasing paranoia, and he's restless, and both of those things come out as, like, we've talked about that guy. We've all known that guy, right? Who just makes you uneasy to be around. He could just turn on you in a second flat. And so you just try to avoid him at all costs. Well, he's that guy very much. But to some degree, some of these guys they're almost kind of licking his boots too, even though they fear him, because they want to be involved in whatever of the next scheme is, because thieving is essentially their livelihood, right?
And it's been successful and they haven't gotten caught. And they, the James gang is very notorious in real life at this time.
And they, especially Robert Ford, they want to be part of the story tales, the fairy tales.
He wants to be in the books.
Right. Yeah. They want to be legends like Jesse. But
Jesse, it should be
those days have passed.
Right. It should be noted that this version of the James gang is not the James gang at its height.
Right.
Jesse and Frank have almost purposely brought in dullards and idiots and just your common thugs.
Yeah.
They're
like Joker thugs.
Right. And it's just like they're just henchmen at this point. Yeah. Most of the other original James gang have been killed.
Right.
At this point.
And his brothers are in jail, I think.
Right.
The other James brothers. Whatever you find out too really early about Robert Ford is that Frank doesn't think he has the ingredients, right? Yeah. Like he kind of tries to sneak up on Frank, and that's kind of an interesting theme in this movie. You can't sneak up on Frank, but you can sneak up on Jesse James, which is kind of interesting between the two brothers. Frank is still very solidly stoic and understands, I think, that this is the end, right?
Yeah.
He knows, and maybe in real life I don't know what their failure was at the end of the train robberies and whatever, but Frank is very protective of his group. And he's like, tells Robert Ford, I wouldn't want you anywhere near anything I'm doing tonight. And
Right.
when Robert Ford goes to Jesse James, he's like, I'd let anybody ride with me. I don't care.
Right.
It's
Well,
kind of his.
But
yeah.
but it's interesting though, because there's two things that kind of start to feed his paranoia. He no longer has Frank watching his back,
Right.
and he doesn't trust any of these guys, right? Because he doesn't know them. So
Right.
he's almost kind of like a shell of himself, and he's basically leads through fear, right?
Yeah,
100%.
because like this is probably, it's like I think it's just this ragtag team that is ultimately the downfall.
Yeah.
And Frank is probably thinking it's like we're gambling now, and at some point you got to walk away from the table, or you're getting gunned down,
Yep.
or something. These
Yep.
people are going to fail you, if not kill you. And I think maybe, but between, kind of between the lines is, Frank realizes this is it. This is our last hurrah. And I'm getting out before I end up on the, on the shit end of the stick, if you will, or
Yeah. And
the business end of a gun, or whatever you want to call
and as Jason mentioned, these guys are mostly like Joker thugs, right? But you do have, and Frank probably recognizes this, Liddell or Little.
Little, yeah.
He's a pretty smart guy.
He's an
Yeah.
extremely smart guy, which is probably the last person you want in a gang like this, because he's going to find an out.
Yeah, he's there. You would question his motives.
Yeah,
If you had a really smart guy standing right by your side that you didn't really know very well, you would definitely question their motives.
right.
And
Because
Robert
he's
Ford
a
is
guy
not.
who could have his own gang.
Yeah, probably. Robert Ford's not stupid either. Like,
Right.
he's not the smartest guy in the world, but
he's
he
naive.
thinks, yes, but he's got plans, that man.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure, but he's naive about like why he's there and what he wants to, and because even Charlie mentions the fact that he didn't think, like Robert was the one who talked him in to joining the gang.
Right.
That Charlie didn't really have this aspiration that Robert did.
Right.
And he knew that it came from these childhood kind of immature daydreams of being one of these pulp heroes.
Right. Yeah, and that's a smart move too. Robert Ford sends in his amiable brother, right? Like, people are gonna like Charlie. They're just
Right.
gonna like Charlie because he's one of those people. He's a little bit goofy, a little bit stupid, but he also seems very loyal. And he's loyal like to a fault in this film.
Yeah, because when it comes down to it, it's one James and two Fords, as
Right.
opposed to two James and one Ford,
Right.
or whatever. It's they stick to the end.
Yeah.
With Charlie maybe sticking to the end more out of fear.
But I think Charlie also, not to put the cart ahead of the horse here, would have been happy if Robert wasn't involved and he could have just done this, let the thing go down in flames with Jesse James. Whatever happened, he seemed happy. He seemed happiest when Robert wasn't around, honestly.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
At least my take from
No,
him.
that's entirely possible. So yeah, and I guess I'll go ahead and kind of say one of the things that I kind of got to thinking about with this movie, particularly after the end, because we've kind of already touched upon it. It's like Robert's got this shoebox full of these old Western pulp books that glorify the exploits of the outlaws, and it's kind of interesting. This is what, our third straight movie that takes place in 1881.
Is it really? I didn't realize that.
Or something like that. It's right around that same time. Because this is the end of the outlaw era.
Yeah.
But it's also the, I mean, the height of the, the songs about them, the books about them, the easy I mean, essentially this is what 19th century comic books, really,
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
it is, except for it's about real people instead of imaginary characters and what have you. But so he has these books, and it's kind of funny because the way I kind of looked at this was, it's like, this is something that still happens today. I mean, he's essentially creating a parasocial relationship with Jesse James.
Yeah.
So much so that he wants to track him down and become his friend no matter the cost, even if he has to kill some guys, rob some banks, take down some trains or whatever, and it's like, this is a relationship that's completely and totally one-sided.
Mm-hmm.
And it is due to this kind of romanticization, at least, of how he looks at these stories that he's reading about. And I know, Jason, you and I have talked about this. I don't know if we've ever really talked about this on the show before, but we have a really weird fetish in this country for people who are famous, people who have power, people who are rich, and people who rebel. And that fourth one has confused us for a long time about our history with the Civil War and how almost romanticized we make that whole thing. And it's like, it's pretty black and white what was going on there. And depending on where you lived, you were on one side or the other. And depending on what your class was, there were certain things you definitely wanted. That was, but because Jesse James, they make no bones about it. I mean, the James brothers were Confederates.
Yeah.
So they're already kind of, they're both rebels, and they're both celebrities, and they have power because of that. And, it's kind of pulling this kind of dumb kid into, that's what I want to be because I don't know what else I can be. And, and I was, the more I kind of thought about it, it's like reading those books were probably a lot like when people like listen to like true crime shows or podcasts or whatever, it's like you really get into that.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people aren't going to thrill to that to the point where they become those things, but there is kind of a fantasy behind that gets built with these kind of stories that fill in the gaps between the truths. And
well, it's interesting. I mean, think about all of recorded history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our perceptions of people are very much built upon recorded history,
right?
And only until recent, time, like less than, you could even say less than 100 years, has recorded history been able to produce itself at the rate that it does today, like this exponentially fast rate. And anybody can share what their account of anything is, right? And everybody's trying to write their own version of events and their own history, right? So it gets very confusing, but it's always been confusing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we have more conflicting information to deal with today than we did back then. And it's a little easier to discern based on accounts of things that happened, maybe what was the kernel of truth and what wasn't, right?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's I think Chuck said it offline, how interesting it is that all 5 of these movies really kind of deal with a lot of the same theme of that legendary stature of the Western outlaw or the Western lawman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really just how paper thin most of that really is. And then this movie, I think you're 100% right, Jeff, about casting Robert Ford as that kind of almost fanboy stalker type character, like someone in modern day who would be kind of creepy if he started kind of hanging around your house trying to ingratiate himself to you to get close to your fame, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and the thing is that, he is, and, we hear a little bit, and I love the narration of this movie, but we hear a little bit about what's going on with Jesse James at the very, very beginning. We learn the very basics that are immutable facts about him. He's missing part of his finger. He lived at this place on this date, and he had a wife and kids, and and so on and so forth. And so we learn about that, and it's like, okay, we've set up the pure facts that we have as of whatever date that was, 1881. And then we kind of see him with his gang, and Frank is the impenetrable one, but Jesse's almost seeming to play up to what Robert Ford is projecting onto him. And, and you kind of say, yeah, this guy's kind of a neat character. It's like, oh, if everything goes right, and as long as you do your part, I don't think this guy is going to hurt me. And then they get on the train, and he beats somebody to death, basically. It's not a shot. He doesn't shoot somebody. He wants to club them to death. And that's scary.
He's going to shoot him. He's going to shoot him, and someone stops him.
Well, he pretty much tore that guy's skull apart with just beating him.
He hurt him pretty bad with that hit.
Yeah. And so, he was bloodthirsty and scary. And Robert Ford looks past that and is able to look past that to a certain point. And then it starts to become a little too much for him, that this guy is he's not that reliable person to be around.
And he also kind of finds himself in a precarious position, right?
Oh yeah, because he's in.
Yeah.
And you don't leave too easily.
Right. Yeah, and it's not that he ever felt like he belonged, or I don't know if have you ever had a friend who just or someone that you met, right, who just had like a charisma about them, and you meet like in school, and they're just like, they just seem like the best person in the world, and you're super friendly for like a month, you do everything together, and then all of a sudden they just move on to the next person, and they do the same thing with that person, and it's like you never existed. There's something about Jesse James and how he's portrayed with that. He's like, he finds a person who is he can kind of leech off of, like
he lives in the dating period.
He's a bit,
people.
He's a bit of a vampire.
Whatever that period is of the love, the romantic phase between people is where you stay, and you never get beyond when the real relationship would form.
Everything's right on the surface. Yeah. And Jesse James doesn't feel like he's someone who is capable of friendships like that or trust like that.
Right.
It could be, I mean, is that a little bit of a sociopath trait? I mean,
maybe. Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably safe to say Jesse James was probably sociopathic or psychopathic.
Whatever pathic you got.
We talked about that a little bit, right? He's one of those. I did want to say one thing about narrative, because leading up, and it probably dies shortly after 1881, narrative throughout history was a song, right?
Yeah.
That was the story that was built. And in the 1900s, narrative was... And poetry, yep. And you can't use poetry on horror. We know that. Quote from the movie.
Thank you, Dick Little.
Yeah, thank you, Dick Little. Little Dick. But in the 1900s, it was controlled textbook narrative, right? It's whatever the powers that be wanted you to hear.
The victors wrote history.
Yes, and now in the last 20 years, we've gone from like a completely controlled narrative to a completely uncontrollable narrative about situations. It's kind of wild.
It is wild. Yeah, I mean, the printing press definitely is exploded misinformation, right?
Yeah.
That's where a lot of these pulp novels came from. It's like, what do you believe? I think a lot of people probably realize, I got to take this with a grain of salt. These are for kids.
I don't know
You
if a
know?
lot of people would
Yeah.
believe that. I think
But-
there's probably again, remember, there are
But a
far
lot of
more
people would
people
buy
named
into it
after
totally.
Jesse James than there are named after Robert Ford.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he was a celebrity, right? His name was in the zeitgeist, regardless. You know.
It still is.
It still
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to go back too far. I wanted to get that point in before
No,
we
that's
move too
a
far
great
beyond
point.
it. Yeah. Yeah, so they
yeah.
do successfully, if not with issue, rob the train. They don't, I don't think, find
They don't
wherever
get
the rest of the money is,
Yeah, there wasn't much on there. They were expecting more.
20,000 or whatever they were looking for. And that's kind of why Frank quits. He's like, we can't do this anymore. It doesn't work, and
High risk, low reward. Yeah.
I think Robert Ford asks him, like, well, what are you going to do? He's like, I'd rather go, whatever he says, make clean shoes or whatever back in Baltimore and just be done
Mm-hmm.
with this life. But that's not what Jesse wants to do. And they kind of have a moment, Robert Ford and Jesse on the porch, right, where Jesse is telling him, or Robert is kind of telling him about his fascination, kind of lightly, not to the degree that it's exposed later in the film. But Jesse kind of likes that, right?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, this kid loves me. It's like that. I can use this to
Yeah.
make him move my furniture for me.
Yeah, and
It's
it's also kind of like he's enjoying being romanticized,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Because in his mind, it's hard. You don't really get a lot into his mind in this movie. You have to really draw some conclusions about what his motives really are, right?
All you know is he's kind of chaotic at this point.
He is very chaotic. He's very
Unstable.
reactionary, unstable, erratic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's impossible to know what he's thinking. And that's again what makes him so fucking scary, right?
Yeah.
He's that scary bully kid who you don't know what the hell he's going to do next, and it's terrifying, so you just want to not be around him.
Yeah. Well, he's paranoid. He has insomnia because he has rheumatoid arthritis.
Right.
So I don't think, and this is kind of shown a little bit later, he has a whole lot of lucidity in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's on both ends of the spectrum all the time, but never really fully there. He comes out of that fog a couple times in the movie. But yeah, he's really kind of either monster or sedated.
But his instincts are still pretty good.
Yeah.
Because he thinks that these members of the most recent James gang are turning against him, and he's right. A couple of them are.
Yep.
Yeah, I like the fact that because the person that they are going to work with is Jim Cummins.
Never seen him.
Never seen
not
him.
in the picture.
Nope.
I'm sure he's in the 4,000 hours of this movie that was cut somewhere.
But that works in this movie. That Jim Cummins is kind of like a ghost, right?
Yeah.
He's just the ghost on the
Well,
outside.
he's the ghost of, because he was a former James gang member. He's kind of the ghost of Jesse's past.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who has decided to go his own, or is maybe at some point had enough of Jesse's shit, or whatever, and it's like, come join
and that's revealed when Robert Ford is finally sent away from Jesse James, and he goes back to his sister's ranch where Jesse's cousin Woodhite is, and what is it? Dick Little creeps up on him when he's in a bath and is like, "What did Jesse say?" "Well, don't ever tell him I'm working with Jim Cummins or I'll kill you. We good?" That's basically, it's really kind of
yeah, for a smart guy, that probably wasn't smart.
No.
Especially because it's shortly after this where Wood and Dick that's perfect.
Exactly.
Where they both Woodhite and Dick Little.
That's wild.
Isn't it? Yeah, it's a size compare. Anyway, so God, but they quickly start teasing Robert Ford, at which point why does Dick think that any of this was a good idea to say, it's like they're just looking for somebody to manipulate, I think. And they're just bullying somebody when in fact, this could all go really, really badly.
Well, Dick thinks he has a little bit of control over Robert because Charlie and him are friends, and he's also presumably banging Robert's sister.
Yeah.
And
well, he wants to, and so does Wood.
Yeah, well, I think you can assume that he probably is, and maybe everyone is in some sense.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that we hear story-wise is that she's a widow and she has rebuffed both of them, and have but that's hearsay at this point. I mean, it could be that she's saying, I don't want anything to do with either of them, but they can stay here as long as they want. Wink, wink.
Right. And Robert's very young. He's 19 years old. He's still a kid, basically, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
He's not fully mature, so this kind of tactic that Little uses is something that might work with a kid. Yeah. Unfortunately.
I will say one thing for sure about Dick. He does fuck that one girl in the outhouse. Right on the shitter.
Yeah, he does. That's what Heights' dad's wife.
Yeah. That's
yeah. Oh well, it gets him shot.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's the sexiest outhouse scene I've ever seen. And that's not that. Yeah, she is.
She's pretty hot.
But it's not that sexy, all things considered. But
I'm
is
sure
still the sexy.
Smelled so bad in there.
Oh, probably. Let's put it this way: it's a lot sexier than the Unforgiven outhouse moment, where it was just some guy getting gunned down.
At least it was an outhouse lit at night by Roger Deakins. So.
And it was a two-banger. There were two.
It was a. Oh man!
People getting guns from outhouses. People getting killed in outhouses. People having sex in outhouses.
Yeah,
it's another theme.
The whole damn circle of life.
Yeah.
In an outhouse.
That's our second theme we did not intend this month.
Whole manner of sex and violence.
Yep. and waste management.
Yes.
But while
I bet you they don't even notice the smell. I feel like everything just stinks in 1881 in the West. So it's like there's just varying degrees of stench.
Yeah. So when I moved into my current house, there are farms nearby, and I would smell manure a lot when I first moved in this neighborhood. I don't smell it at all anymore. So I don't know if that's like me getting used to it. Or
it's either that or sprawl. Yeah.
It's one or the other. But
man, coming up soon we have I think truly the true psychopathic moment of Jesse is when he beats the shit out of the Ford's cousin, little boy. I mean,
God,
he brutally beats that kid. I mean, maybe 10, 11 years old, 12 at most.
And it's pretty. It's not super graphic, but it's very effective.
Yeah.
And this is the moment where you would say Jesse James has undone himself, right? Mm-hmm. Because anyone who loves him now has a problem with him.
It's real hard to overlook that, no matter how much you worship the guy. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's it's going to be the tipping point in any situation.
Yep.
Right? If you have the balls to do something about it. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah, because like he has found out that Wood and Dick are interested in working with Jim Cummins.
Right.
Yeah, Ed Miller kind of tells him.
Ed Miller tells him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
the great God, the cast in this movie is phenomenal. It's Garrett Dillahunt as Ed Miller.
He's awesome in this movie. Everyone is so effectively scared when Jesse James is around in this movie. Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Garrett Dillahunt he doesn't know what a bad performance is. He's incapable of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's the one who, and it's like he forces him to kind of give up information out of fear, basically. He gets gunned down.
Yeah.
We don't find that out yet, but yeah.
Right. He's killed off screen, yeah.
Yeah.
And then who is it that
He goes and get Dick Little.
It does.
is it? Yeah,
Yeah,
it is,
because he knows Dick Little is has it, is plotting against him.
Was thinking about taking his bounty, basically.
Yeah, right. So he's gonna he's picking up Dick Little to go track down Jim Cummings, telling him, Jesse knows they're in cahoots, and Dick Little doesn't know, but maybe knows, right?
I mean, when Jesse James says, "Let's go for a ride,"
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of like getting in the car with
it's
a mob guy.
Right. It's an old
Yeah.
mob tactic. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. Yep.
And that's when they go
Let's go for a ride.
and they beat the shit out of the little kid.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Looking for somebody. He's like, I'm never told. I'm like 12 years old. They don't tell me anything.
Yeah.
And like Dick is like, Jesse, calm down. Stop with this. And this is the second time.
Yeah.
Somebody has to tell him to hold back.
I think it was Little the first time. It was either him or Height. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all had masks on, so it was hard to tell. But
yeah, because at first I thought maybe it was Robert Ford, but he may not even been on that car.
no, I don't think he was in there.
Yeah,
But I could be wrong.
Yeah, he may have been one of the guys outside. So no, you're right. I think because I mean, and it's just it's a hard scene.
Yeah.
He's just wailing on this kid.
Yeah.
And it's catching up to Jesse. The stuff that I think Frank got out of first is starting to kind of buckle under the weight. It's everything is starting to fall apart.
Well, this is kind of when he has one of his first lucid moments too. Like he realizes what he's done. He starts to cry, but then instead of feeling sorry for beating the kid, he starts feeling sorry for himself.
Yeah.
Instead, because he has rheumatoid arthritis and he can't sleep. And it's really kind of interesting because Dick Little does not seem like the kind of guy you'd want to be around either, but he has a conscience about this stuff, at least
Right.
a semi-conscious. And he's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm out.
Dick Little is kind of like the reckless party boy, right? He's fun until he goes a little too far.
Or he's with you until you want to go a little too far.
Right. Yeah.
One or the other. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He's kind of like the bad influence, but and you two together could probably get into a lot of trouble, but it's like a it's
he
kind
might
of like
yield first.
Yeah, exactly. But neither one of you want to actually do any harm per se, right? But you end up in trouble regardless.
Yeah, I have friends like that.
Yeah,
I've been grounded from them, and I've told the stories.
Yeah.
We weren't Dick Little and Jesse James, but
Right. And this is because this is after I think Dick and Wood went to Wood's dad's house.
Yes.
And there's already animosity because like Wood's like, don't screw my stepmom. No matter how much you want to, no matter how much I want to, we can't.
We can't.
Right.
We can't do it.
And he's
fucking up my shit.
Right.
I'm fucking in my shit.
Dick ends up kind of basically hiding out at the Fords. And Wood discovers that, oh yeah, he did screw my dad's wife.
Well, he shot at him and then he ran away.
Yeah.
At his dad's house.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then so he comes in ready to kill. Now,
that's just comedy, man.
Yeah, it is.
That whole thing was funny as hell.
But in real life, it was not over that specific. It was over something else. Like I don't even think it was about a woman. I don't remember. It was, but it was a very similar thing. He was planning to kill Dick in that bedroom, and Robert stops it.
Yeah.
By shooting Wood in the face, basically, or in the back, through the back of the head. And so they're shooting at each other and missing completely. And they're not that shooting. Far away. Yeah. And but we find out that Robert Ford is pretty much a deadeye. Like he shoots just once. That's all it takes.
Yep.
And it basically blows through Wood's head. He's still alive for a little bit, and then the Ford's sister comes up and it's like, well, I guess you better start saying whatever it is you want to say because you ain't got much longer. It's like just so like every day. It's like
It is.
it's like one of their cows died.
It's
or
definitely that made me wonder, like, is that how people really responded when things like this happen, especially in those like kind of groups where people died more often there, probably in the outlaw gangs, but they're very like.
We were talking about that one scene last week where the family is just watching a duel.
Yeah.
And
so it's shown that way over and over again. So there's some historical accuracy there.
It's a desensitization, right?
Yeah.
And it could just be
a commonplace aspect to it.
People also didn't live very long back then either.
Yeah.
That's what I was just about to say, is that until the last 100 years or so, you probably feel pretty lucky if you made it to our ages.
Frank was old.
Jesse was old, and that is surprising that he died at the age of 72.
Yeah, and Jesse James was, he was
30-something.
middle age, then though.
Yeah,
or even past middle age.
Right, because that was the thing. It's like they called him middle aged in the narration, and I looked and I was like 36. I'm ancient. At this point.
Right.
But yeah, that would be about right. It's like disease will come and get you. Potentially Native Americans. If you
guns,
if you
germs, or steel will get you.
Exactly.
Ow.
So, and Chuck just got something.
I hit myself in the elbow. Sorry for that faux pas. Podcast faux pas I just committed.
No, but yeah. So, they also like Wood. Oh, and Charlie has to escape too. So he just flat out jumps out the fucking window.
Breaks his leg, basically.
Right. And because like later, Jesse's like, so why were you on the roof in December?
That scene is fucking chilling.
It is.
Yes.
Because Jesse is showing how intelligent he is, even if it's driving him insane. And this is the moment in which Robert Ford grows up. And this is
let's set this up first though. They have to hide Woodhite's body. They throw him in a ravine. As we'd said, Little left Jesse and went back to the house, and that's when Woodhite comes to get him and gets shot in the face. So basically everyone is there. Charlie's there, Robert's there. Obviously their sister Dick is there, but he's hiding in the wall upstairs from Jesse. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, in a crawl space. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think, does Jesse ever even learn he's there in this trip? I don't think he does.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. So he shows up.
Because it almost gets given up by Charlie, who just blurts out, "Oh, we haven't seen Dick for a while."
Yeah.
It's that classic like guilt in the need to confess,
right?
Because it just blurts out of nowhere, and it's like they'll kind of almost do the Stewie like upside down face stare at him.
Yeah, right. I thought Robert said that, but either way, Charlie is totally.
I think you're right. I think it actually was Robert. Yeah,
Robert, because he's nervous as shit. Yeah. When he shows up, but Charlie is also nervous.
Yeah,
but he's also like, he's almost like the soul of this movie. In a lot of ways, at least to me, he was the thread that kept all these really kind of somber, sad shit the entire movie from driving me away. Like if Charlie wasn't there, I might be like, I can't watch this. I can't watch this.
Right. It is a dour movie. Yeah.
That's the power of Sam Rockwell,
I mean, I love him.
I mean,
that's true.
He's just super affable in almost everything.
Let's back up here for a second. We should really talk about who the people are in this movie, because we've already blown past a lot. So obviously, Brad Pitt
Hawkeye's already dead at this point.
Right. Jeremy Renner is Woodhite, and this is before Jeremy
Jason
Renner.
Bourne light.
Right. This
He
is
got shot by another Hawkeye. Sorry, go ahead.
this is before he was even in what's the bomb movie that the best picture that he was in? The
Black
war
Hawk
movie.
Down?
No, the
Oh,
that one.
Hurt Locker.
Hurt Locker.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So this is before even that. You got Casey Affleck as Robert Ford. You got Sam Rockwell as Charlie Ford. Sam Shepard was Frank James. In a almost cameo, Mary Louise Parker is Jesse James' wife.
Yeah. She doesn't have a lot of dialogue. Yeah.
You don't even really see her face, but maybe for like 10 total seconds in this whole damn movie. Mm-hmm. This is a 2-hour and 40-minute movie. And you see somebody who's actually like a name, you hardly see her in it. Mm-hmm. Later on, the sheriff that ends up working with Robert Ford and with Dick to get the confession is Ted Levine.
He puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hook. Stephanie recognized him immediately. I'm like, why are you blurting this out? She's like, that's Ted Levine. I'm like, oh, shit.
I already mentioned Zooey Deschanel, which is later on. James Carville's coming up here in a little bit. The political strategist gets a SAG card.
Yeah.
So
it should also be mentioned that Garrett Dillahunt, who played Ed Miller, he's been in a ton of stuff, but he is pretty well known from Deadwood. He played 2 characters in the series Deadwood, and the first character he played was the man who killed Wild Bill Hickok. Also want to throw a shout out to Paul Schneider as Dick Little.
Oh yeah,
Paul Schneider got his start with David Gordon Green back in the day. They made George Washington and All the Real Girls together, which is also a Zooey Deschanel connection because Zooey Deschanel was in All the Real Girls. That was 2003.
He's very good in this.
Yes, he is. I always like seeing him in a movie. He doesn't pop up in much, but when he does, I know he's going to be good.
This is interesting about Schneider. As research for his role as Jesse Baylor in Elizabethtown, director Cameron Crowe suggested that Schneider tour with the band My Morning Jacket for 5 days.
Huh. That's cool.
Yeah.
Leave it to Cameron Crowe to send a guy on a tour with somebody.
On a tour, yeah. Was he impersonating? Was he impersonating the old editor of Rolling Stone?
Yes, he was. So this dinner scene where I don't think Jesse eats a bite and then tells the Ford lady, I can't remember her name, but a great meal. But we have Robert Ford basically being coerced by his brother to tell some, I wouldn't call them unsavory. What would you call them? Like the tales he told about Robert or about Jesse James when he was a kid, or like his fantasies about him.
Yeah, he's trying to embarrass his little brother, you know?
Yes.
He's trying to like take the tension out of the room, but he's making things exceedingly more uncomfortable for Robert.
Well, and also we should mention that everybody now knows that Jesse James killed their cousin, just flat out gunned him down.
Yep.
Like a dog, basically. And this is the moment where that basically breaks Robert right then. And then his brother trying to embarrass him, he snaps at this point.
Yeah, but he snaps in a very introverted kind of way almost. He wants to be a lion, but he's very like, well, I'm going to go pout in my room. And Jesse, I think, even says like, before you go pout in that room, let me tell you why I'm really here.
Yeah.
And then he tells the story about Ed, I think, at that
point.
Well,
yeah, and he also talks about...
no, he doesn't tell the story about Ed.
No, he talks about the other story about when he killed somebody that was his friend or something.
Yes.
And he, and Robert flat out asks him, why did you kill that person? Or basically, was he gunning for you, or did you gun him down? Basically, was what he wanted to know.
Who is their cousin that he shot down in cold blood then?
Well, that was the dumb guy.
Ed Miller?
Yeah.
He doesn't really fess up to that until he tells Sam Rockwell when they're on the road, when he wakes him up in the middle of the night.
This is later.
Not yet.
I can't remember.
This is before that. Because
then that's right. Because you're right. Because it's in when they're at Jesse James's place. That's when he says he told me he killed Ed Miller. This was, he had been sent away. The last time I think he talked to Jesse, it wasn't a very good conversation. He's realizing that Jesse James is not the person he thought he was.
Sure.
And then he's talking about, like, why did you kill this friend of yours? And that sets this up. And then later, after he's already made the deal with Ted Levine and James Carville to basically either bring in or bring down Jesse James, is when they go off to prepare for that last bank robbery. And you're right.
He makes he makes that deal by giving up Dick Little.
Right.
At the house, he's like, Dick Little's here. He's a wanted man, and they come and take him away. And that's when he makes the deal with the sheriff. And
even Dick Little gets off kind of easy because he basically spills a ton of beans too. It seems like he ends up exchanging info. It seems as though he makes a deal too.
Yeah, I think he does. He ends up in the paper later for being taken in, but
which is the exact moment that Jesse realizes I think he realizes what's about to happen.
Oh yeah. 100. I mean, 1,000%. In agreement with you there. But so at this point, Robert Ford makes that deal. He goes and works at a general store, basically, while he's waiting for word on where Jesse James is. Jesse is traveling with Charlie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Still talking about the job that's going to happen that never does. It's even narrated, right? Like there's 3 or 4 jobs they discuss that never happen. And then Charlie talks Jesse into bringing Robert back in, or Bob as they call him. Let's bring Bob in. If we do this job, we're going to need a third person. We can't do this alone, or just the 2 of us. And I know you can trust my brother. And right as Levine basically tells Robert, you're not going to get out of this situation alive, I think is kind of what he tells him. If you find him, you're going to die. Are you sure you want to do this? And
independently, Charlie realizes we're dead.
Well, yeah, there's this wonderful scene where, and it's almost like the mirror shot from, what movie was that? Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, where Jesse James walks out onto the ice. He sees his reflection and he just fires like 5 shots into the ice while Charlie is back on ground like, oh shit. But Charlie is still kind of loyal to Jesse.
Well, where's he going to go at this point? Well,
nowhere, but Robert still kind of loves him too. Bob Ford still kind of loves Jesse James, like through the entirety of this movie, really. At least in my opinion.
Yeah.
But then they show up. Jesse James and Charlie show up while Bob is picking shit off a shelf, and they're like, do you really like working here? It looks like you like working here, or you could come with us. And that's when they start to plan, I think, the last job.
Yeah. And he goes and gives the information to the sheriff, James Timberlake, and says, here's the plan, basically. And we're going to go off and do this thing. And, it's, and at this point, there's this super uneasiness of, it's clear that Jesse's wife doesn't like the Ford boys being there.
Doesn't like Bob. I think she's okay with Charlie.
But there's just this awkwardness in that.
Well, yeah, I mean, she says, you didn't tell me Bob. Like, she calls him out specifically. You didn't tell me Bob was going to be here.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what was her issue with him. Was he just...
She didn't trust him. She didn't trust him.
Just skeevy?
Yeah.
Bob's just kind of squirrely.
Yeah.
But anyway, so, but like, because they even make mention, and like the mention was that Jesse never takes his guns off. And that was the reason why the Fords kind of felt like, man, we're in a tight situation because he can kill us at any minute. I mean, Jesse won't even let Bob get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that great scene when Charlie's gathering wood and Jesse James is going through the plan. And he's like, here's what Charlie's going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. And come sit next to me or whatever. And he's like, and if the teller stands up, and then he basically reenacts the scene of slitting the teller's throat with Bob. And it's obviously 100% Jesse James is threatening Robert Ford.
That's intimidation. Yep.
Yeah, I'm talking about this other guy, but this is you. This is you who I've gotten my grit, kind of thing. And it's really terrifying. And the way that Charlie breaks the tension, he's like, oh, he got you. Yeah, you got me too. I was really scared. So it's a little bit of humor, but it's still like, that scene will stay with me because it's fucking masterfully acted by everyone in that scene.
Yeah. Your impersonation of that made me think if this movie had been made like 20 years earlier, it probably...
I should have been in it?
No, it would have been like, I don't know, like... I'm just trying to figure out like who would have played that. It's like...
Will Ferrell?
No, God, no.
I was joking, but...
hang on a second here. It would have been like... Maybe like Rick Moranis or something. like
I am
Rick
a short, almost Canadian.
You are almost Canadian. Yeah. No, but I mean, like it like that's the goofiness would have been like, he would have just come in as like, oh man, like I'm just thinking of Lewis from Ghostbusters,
right?
At this point. But anyway, yeah.
Coffee?
So
yes, have some. Sorry.
But they're trying to get Jesse, because it's like, what is it, Palm Sunday or something that's going on that weekend, and it's like it's a big family thing, and or like they're gonna go to church, and it's like Jesse James doesn't even take off his guns for church, which he'd fit right in today.
He walks into town with his son.
Yeah,
and when he comes back into town, he's wearing his guns, and Robert's like, aren't you worried anyone's going to see you? Like, it's not really smart to go into town with your guns. And he spins around. I don't know what he says to Bob at that point, but then he picks up his daughter, spins her around, and her shoe flies off. And then they all walk into the house, and it's basically time for breakfast or lunch. I guess breakfast? I don't really know. But Bob and Charlie are both scared shitless at this moment. Yeah.
Well,
and more scared.
Yeah. And so, because they're like, man, it's like, if you're going to go to services, you probably should just take your guns off or whatever. And he's like, no, I don't ever, but then that's when he sees the paper about Dick giving a full confession. And then at that point, he just takes off his guns. He puts them down. He realizes, hey, that painting.
Well, don't
of that
blow
horse,
through this. Well, don't blow through it. you got him at the table,
Right.
right? And he sees it, and Robert knows that he sees it. And he goes into the room with the gun that Jesse James apologized to him with in an earlier lucid moment, right?
Yeah.
And says, I don't like the person that I am. The man that I was, that I loved, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know where he's gone, basically, right? So Robert goes and sit down, and he's like, this is it. One way or another, this is it. And he just sits there and starts crying. And it's like, really, but it was emotional for me, even
Right.
watching it.
Well, yeah, because
sorry, I
also
didn't want to blow
because also Charlie starts to he
leans his head on the doorway. He's like,
yeah.
this is either I'm going to die or Jesse James is going to die.
Yeah. This is one of those situations where it's like everybody knows something's got to happen, but they have so much more time to think about it than you typically would in a gunfight.
Right.
It's like this is they've had to think about this now at this point for potentially weeks.
Yeah.
So,
and who decides what's going to happen? Jesse James does.
Yeah. I mean, he's the one who, he realizes the Dick has given the confession. He takes off his guns. He just puts it on the table, turns around. It's like, hey, my horse picture is
rather
crooked.
dusty.
Yeah, it's rather dusty and it needs to be, cleaned up and straightened up. And so he gets up there and he knows what's going to happen.
He's authored what's going to happen.
Right.
At least as far as I can tell in this movie, he invites this upon himself because he's already written his suicide note to Bob Ford orally. Right?
Right.
Like that was his note of I'm not the man I used to be. I'm ready to go, basically, is what he tells him. But Robert Ford is still struggling with it. Jason, do you have anything to note here? You haven't said anything in a while. I don't want to blow through the end without.
No, I'm fine. Sorry. I guess I'll just say I'm kind of work thing. So.
Damn. Work. Yeah, so as Jeff said, Jesse James gets up on a chair. He's examining and dusting his picture, and much like Robert Ford shot Woodhite, he shoots Jesse James, I think, through the back of the head. It was hard to tell where exactly he shot him. I think it was reported he was shot in the chest in stuff I've read, but Jesse dies immediately. His wife runs in, and she, as a contrary to the earlier death in the movie where people are like, well, got a second to say goodbye, she's hysterical about it. And Charlie and Robert run off, basically saying it was an accident. One of them says it was an accident.
Yeah.
His gun went off.
It was Charlie. Yeah. Charlie is the one who says he didn't mean to. He didn't mean to. His gun just went off.
Yeah.
And then and then they just run off and they go to the to send a telegram to the governor to say, Jesse James is dead, and they expect to receive $10,000, but they only got $500 each. So
damn.
They got taken.
Yep.
And they think they're going to be famous. I mean, like, why not? It's like you're the guy who shot and killed the most famous bloodthirsty outlaw. You should be, it's almost like a hierarchy in that time.
Right. But why not? Because a theme that we've discussed almost week after week this month is that legend supersedes whatever, like, actual fact.
Well, they put his body on display for people to come and mourn. They put it on freaking ice so people can
But that
they
wasn't
sell
the intent.
pictures.
They don't want them to mourn. It's more like a spectacle, right? Like,
Well, yeah, I mean, it is partly spectacle, but it's like it's treated in a way that where it's like, I mean, the Fords were lucky to get any recognition for it, and but then the folk hero became, like while Robert Ford is trying to kind of build his own folk legend around being the man who shot and killed Jesse James, there are people writing songs about all the good things that Jesse James did.
well, yeah, you cannot manufacture your own legend, right?
Well,
like legend needs to organically grow. Go ahead, Jason. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, let's just face it. It's a little bit unsavory to reenact your shooting of an unarmed man in the back, regardless of who it is, night after night after night.
Sure.
Yeah.
And to glorify your own self in that way. I mean, that's unsavory as all fuck, right?
Well, yeah. And
so,
I would say,
sure, it's a novelty at first. People are curious.
Right.
But as he keeps
the
continuing to do it, I forget how many times did he say he killed Jesse James in theater? Like
something like 500 times. Or
yeah, like a bunch of times. People kind of started to turn on it. It's like you're capitalizing on this weird thing, Because
and part of it is,
and it does feed into the idea of he's manufacturing his own legend. Right? He's not. It's not an organic thing.
He wants the pulp book for himself.
Yeah.
And he probably is also using this as, his two things. One, probably his coping mechanism. And two, they didn't get the money that the governor promised them.
Right. It probably is a means for income for sure. Right.
And it had another unintended consequence too, because forcing Charlie to live through it as Jesse James started to make him actually live in it. Yeah. Right. And he felt worse and worse and worse and worse. Sorry, Jeff, go ahead and say what you're going to say.
No, I was going to say, it's almost like the P.T. Barnum thing. It's like, if people are still going to pay for it, I'm going to take their money,
Right.
Right. And then people started to eventually, like we were alluding to, yelling at Robert Ford as he was enacting this and calling him coward, which is, the payoff of the coward in the title. And Robert kind of snaps.
Yeah.
Right. He takes the shit out of some people in the crowd. And he kind of, it's interesting because there's the whole scene with, we haven't even mentioned, what's his name? I keep wanting to say Lou Reed. It's Nick Cave.
Oh, yeah, Nick Cave.
Nick Cave is the bard.
He's singing folk songs in bars about Jesse James.
Yeah, he's a bard. It's almost like a fantasy novel at this point.
Yeah, because they're making Jesse James out to be Robin Hood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that was a Robin Hood song that just, they just put Jesse James's name in.
So Robin ran away. He bravely ran away. No, I didn't.
Not even close to the same character, but that's okay. But anyway,
you weren't talking about Monty Python? My bad.
Well, I wasn't talking about Sir Robin. But anyway, no, so I mean, like, and there, here's Robert Ford basically having been called having been called a coward, and then being called and snapping, and then going to that bar, hearing that song, he's pissed drunk, and the information in the song isn't even accurate in the least.
No, they keep saying 3 kids.
Right.
Well, this is the whole, this is obviously the moment in the story where it's telling you that these legends are untrue, right? It's kind of throwing shade at the folk song history I was talking about that happened all the way up until the 1900s. The truth was a glorified version of what actually happened. Right? They had kids, they had number of deaths, they had whatever. Sorry.
No, and then meanwhile, Charlie is trying to get forgiveness from Jesse James' widow. And so he is
Oh, I forgot he did this.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so he keeps writing letters. He never sends any of them. And then he's got tuberculosis, so he kills himself. So, and and so now Robert basically is isolated.
Alone.
And yeah, and like he has none of the people that he ran with before, none of the people he knew. I mean, like it's all gone. Some people are okay with him, I mean, he's he ends up buying a saloon. He ends up meeting Dorothy Evans, that's Zoe Deschanel, and he's able to basically be himself for the first time. And then he decides to basically in Colorado just kind of be a saloon owner. And I have a feeling that most people there in that town was happy if anybody just served them a drink, and didn't really matter who you were. If you're serving drinks and you're doing it at a fair price, they're coming to drink and they're coming to be your friend.
Yeah, and he seems a little bit contented. Like he's come to terms with what he's done. He doesn't like it. He definitely landed on the end of that I shouldn't have done this, right? But he's contented.
Mm-hmm.
And he's finding a life with Dorothy, who was the first person to really listen to him and not judge him like the legend that this is what we've been talking about for weeks. When Robert Ford would show up anywhere, right? He had like something came before him, right? His notoriety or whatever. This is the first person that's given him a chance in forever, right? Like to explain himself or be himself. So he kind of is contented at this point.
Yeah. And meanwhile, there's another guy by the name of O'Kelly who decides I'm going to take down the guy who took down Jesse James.
He's going to Robert Ford.
Exactly. And he walks into the saloon with a rifle that
someone in the town helped them fashion.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, when somebody says I'm here with this, with this weapon to kill this guy, you're going to say no if they ask for your services.
Right.
But anyway, he walks in, he gets Bob's attention and he shoots him dead in the saloon.
And that's important too. He gets his attention. He doesn't really Robert Ford.
Sure.
He's looking him in the eyes when he shoots him.
Right.
Yeah.
And that guy ends up I don't think there's anything about that guy whose life, is
well, we haven't heard much about him. Like his name is not in the zeitgeist, right? Like it's not.
There is no Elton John song with his name in the title of it.
Right.
So yeah, no, he's he didn't get, I mean, I think he ended up getting arrested like shortly after. But anyway, he yeah, and and it kind of ends with the fact that there was no fanfare for Robert Ford's passing.
Right.
He just got buried someplace, and that was the end of that.
Yeah, it's almost like the death of the West was with Robert Ford, almost like where you would get this kind of fanfare over a famous person or whatever is just kind of buried at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, and certainly at that time, it was, the 1890s. There was a whole different world going on.
That had moved on. Whatever fame Robert Ford was looking for didn't really happen anymore, right? Like,
right. And whatever Jesse James was, didn't really happen
No.
anymore.
Not to speak for you, Jason, but I did want to bring up, since you are preoccupied, unfortunately, Casey Affleck is fucking awesome in this movie.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about that because one of the questions that was like, why was he nominated for Best Supporting Actor? And I can actually explain why that is done that way.
Why he was or was not? Sorry.
Why he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor.
Oh, instead of okay.
So once upon a time, and really hasn't been the case for the last 5 or 10 years or so, but once upon a time, it was a marketing tool to get Oscar nominations and especially to get Oscar wins. And I would say 2007 was pretty close to the end of this era because movies were getting on home video sooner, especially if they weren't successes at the box office like this. But movie companies, and certainly in the case of a movie like this, they would like to release a DVD to put into a video store that has winner of all these Oscars on it, right? And if you get nominated and you get nominated for one of the major awards, it was something that if you're still in the movie theaters, it was a big marketing tool and a big marketing push. However, what ended up happening, or what ends up happening with stuff like that is that there are a lot of movies that either have more than one lead, or they have a whole cast of supporting characters, or they have an actor who is not really in that big of a role, but ends up being a major part of why the movie is successful. And what the studios will end up doing is trying to figure out how to best the studio is going to try to best figure out how they can win either a nomination or even better, an Oscar. So in the case of this movie where you have Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck, Warner Brothers wanted them both to be nominated.
So they submitted
them in separate categories.
Yeah.
Because the other thing you don't really want to do is you don't want to get your multiple nominations in a single category.
You don't want to Brad Pitt them against each other?
Right, exactly. Because I mean,
thanks for that, Jason.
Yeah. But think about this. Like we talked about when we talked about The Godfather, right? Whose movie really is The Godfather? Whose trilogy really does that belong to? Exactly. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor against James Caan, which probably split the votes and he didn't win.
Yeah.
And the supporting character, who was such a major influence on the movie, was
One Best Actor,
right? And the same thing, Silence of the Lambs. Technically, Anthony Hopkins is a supporting character, but he's so important to that movie that people were willing to vote for him for Best Actor.
Did Jodie Foster win Best Supporting Actress in that movie? Or was she Best Actress? Yeah, they both got nominated. My bad.
Silence of the Lambs is one of only 3 movies to win all 5 major Oscars: picture, director, actor, actress, and screenplay.
There was a world in my head there for a moment where men and women were nominated for the same award.
Oh.
Not in separate categories.
Well, once upon a time, supporting actors and lead actor, or the lead and supporting, was one category.
Yeah.
So it's a marketing tool. Sometimes, and some critics don't like this, but sometimes they nominate somebody who really has a leading performance in a supporting category to try to kind of cheat a win. So It may have even been a situation where Warner Brothers was like, well, Casey Affleck is so important to this. If people watch this movie, they will want to nominate him, or they will want him to win Best Supporting Actor, win something.
But Daniel Day-Lewis is going to win.
But Daniel Day-Lewis is going to win Best Actor or whatever. Yeah. So it's like we can maybe slide him in there, and because he has such a large role, maybe he wins that award. Not so much the case that year, because a popular movie with a memorable character goes up against them. That's just the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, so no, this is all, I mean, it's all kind of part of the marketing machine, but what they really wanted was for both Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck to be nominated and not be nominated in the same category to give both of them a better shot to win.
Got it.
Boom,
yeah.
drop of knowledge.
Yep,
Any other thoughts on this film?
It's beautifully shot. All 5 of our movies were exceptionally well shot this month.
Yeah.
I think Westerns are almost a guaranteed to be well shot. If you don't shoot a Western very well, get the fuck out of the cinematographers.
You better give me wide shots of beautiful scenery and.
Well, it's the exact same thing. Jason and I have both seen Nope. That is shot like a Western.
I've seen Nope.
Oh, that's right. You have. I forgot. Sorry. Yeah. But that's shot like a Western in several shots, at least in the first half of the movie. And it's like, if you cannot shoot the prairie, you're worthless.
Damn, Jeff. Coming at him hard with that one.
Well, if you don't want to shoot the prairie, then don't make a Western.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than like a drab looking Western, right?
Well, here's the thing though. Westerns can look drab.
Yes, but they
the
need
landscape
to look beautifully drab.
Exactly. I mean, let's put it this way. Like, God, I mean, we talked about 5 movies. One of them was black and white and it still looked pretty. The other 3 were all varying degrees of earth tone, but all gorgeous.
Right.
And, and if we had watched not Silence of the Lambs, Dances with Wolves, we would have seen the exact same thing. It's like, of course that's going to at least be nominated for the cinematography.
Since we're talking about cinematography, I do want to mention the train coming down the tracks.
Oh my God. Yeah.
With Jesse James, I think it was Jesse, or was it Frank? One of them was standing up on the block.
Yeah.
The thing to block the train, and the lights are just shooting through all the trees. It's one of the most memorable shots I've seen in a long time.
Here's the funny thing about that. You know what that really reminded me of? Like the first thing I thought of when I saw it?
Halloween?
No.
Well, you asked me to guess.
Okay, well, no. I mean, that's fine because I'm in the mood for Halloween movies. Can we fast forward to October again?
Yeah, let's do it.
No, it made me think of remember the scene in Close Encounters where they come to get the little boy?
Yeah.
And all the lights are going through the windows and everything. It's like it's terrifying, but it's also gorgeous.
Right.
And I was kind of getting the same feeling, except for like in this, it was kind of more of the movie is arriving.
Right.
It's like.
But the train is coming to the end of its tracks, too.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No, it's, Roger Deakins shot this. This is one of his 27 Oscar nominations.
He's a beast.
Yeah, he was a double loser at the Academy Awards that year.
What was the other one he was nominated for that year?
Old Country for No Men.
Old Country for No Men.
You know what I meant.
It's gonna be that Sunday.
Country for Old Men. Old Country for No Men. Yeah, that's the post-apocalyptic version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start writing it.
What was it that he won for Blade Runner, right?
Yep. He finally broke through with Blade Runner 2049. Yep.
I know he was nominated for Skyfall. I know that. And that's well deserved in that.
He's pretty much done all of the Coen Brothers films since the early ones, right? Like since Miller's Crossing. That's the last one he didn't do.
Yeah, he's done a lot of them. I think there's some he hasn't done recently. But it was Barry Sonnenfeld was before him, and then Barry Sonnenfeld started directing, and that's when they started using Deakins. Yeah, I think there might have been a gap in between Sonnenfeld and Deakins. I have to look. Yeah.
Did it?
I think so. This is a very good movie.
It is,
but it is dour in a lot of ways because you are watching 2 men ultimately
Kill
unravel.
themselves.
Yeah.
They're both killing themselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And one literally kills himself. The third guy literally kills himself.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, this is a good movie. I will still say that I think Unforgiven is my favorite of the month, but we picked 5 gooders for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if I could pick a favorite right now. They were all good.
Yeah.
For sure. For different reasons in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Even though there was a theme, they were all very different.
Yes. I mean, I think it's surprising how kind of funny Good and the Bad and the Ugly was in a lot of ways. And a lot of that is to Eli Wallach and Clint Eastwood's credit. Then, I mean, there's something kind of stoic about Unforgiven, and there's,
Well, it's also funny at times.
At times it is. There's both of these that we watched here at the end are sad in different ways. One is kind of you're trying to figure out how to come to the end of your life, while the other is trying to figure out how to regain what you had when you were younger. And Gary Cooper, his face just acted off of his skull in High Noon.
True that.
His face accepted that Oscar quite graciously. All right. You want to talk about things that are coming up?
Yeah, what's coming up? I don't even know what's coming up next.
Okay, well, Help is coming up.
Noise.
Help is on the way.
Help, yeah. That's right. The Beatles. We are this is the first time we've touched upon the Beatles in any major way since Yellow Submarine, and Jason really didn't like Yellow Submarine.
It's the first time that I get to talk about the Beatles and get ready for that.
Yeah, I'm excited. Help also is the album of the Beatles that is my favorite.
It's up there for me.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good album. The songs from the movie are fantastic. And the songs that are not from the movie are fantastic. And it's kind of the Beatles by way of a kind of James Bond spoof. There's a very James Bondy feel to it.
Yeah.
So look, be ready for that. So Jason, I guess you don't have to show up next time.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I hope he does.
Actually, I've never seen Help.
There is some stuff in this that legitimately crack me up. And there are things that I think about when I see something happening that reminds me of it, I will start giggling to myself from stuff from this movie.
I'll just say that while Jeff said you don't have to be there, we will need your help.
Oh.
Yeah.
I need somebody.
Yeah.
Anybody.
And
we
anybody
have
but Jeff is what
we
he's
have
saying.
we have kind of a fun December planned. It should be
Yes.
Yeah, I think
It's not going to be a long December. It's going to be a fun December.
fun December.
Yeah. So Help is next week. Filmseizure.com. You've got your Spotify, you got your SoundCloud, you got your Apple Podcast, you got your Google Podcast, you got your Stitcher, you got your TuneIn, you got your Audible. Subscribe to us, listen to us there, or you can just go to the website. That's fine too. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. This upcoming Monday at all of those places is the next episode of Monster Mondays. And I'm kicking off a whole month of some Universal. I want to finish the year out on a classy note with some Universal Classic Monsters.
Nice.
And we're getting things kicked off with another round of sequels for the first 3 weeks. And I'm going to start with The Invisible Woman. So that is on Monday. All those places I mentioned before. Go there, do those things, listen to our shows. We have good times. Good times. And we have good discussions, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and then at my website, bmovieanima.com, we have what is that, Friday, December 2nd, I believe it is. Yeah, I believe it is. I have Russ Meyer's Super Vixens, dipping the toe back into the Russ Meyer world. I am excited. Russ Meyer makes fun movies.
Noise.
He makes titillating movies.
He does.
Quite literally. Anyway, so those are the things that are happening when they are happening. Until next week, when when this tremendous trio talks about the Fab Four, I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.